All right, Kevin, back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with my friend Nick Nanton. Nick, welcome, man. So awesome to have you today.
Thanks for having me on, man. I'm excited to. Always great to talk with you, Kevin.
Man, I have been looking forward to this conversation. And you and I, we've known each other a while now. We I don't remember how many years it's been a while. We met in Genius Network in Joe Polish's mastermind group,
Yep.
and I'll tell you, it's interesting because doing this interview right here, right now, today, I've been watching you. You got so much amazing stuff happening, and so I'm really looking forward to having you share your story, your experience. And let's start with just kind of giving everybody a little bit of background. Talk about a little bit about who you are, what you do, who you serve, what inspires you to do what you do. I want to set a little bit of context and start there, Nick.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so at the base, I'm an immigrant kid. My family's from Barbados. We've been there for 300 years. Moved to the Orlando area. So a bunch of my family emigrated together out of Barbados and into the U.S. When I was 10 months old,
Oh,
and I
wow.
have an older brother who's a couple years, 2 years older than me. So I've grown up most of my life in America, but with a lot, I think. In a lot of ways, a lot of immigrant mentality. I mean, my parents my dad's actually from an even smaller island called St. Vincent. And so a lot of what they experienced in their generation, I'm not sure it's fair to say they were a generation behind, but almost in that, like, the way information and the depression, everything traveled through the islands at just a slower pace. It just seemed like, in a lot of cases, my parents' sort of mentality, in a lot of cases, was a lot like some of my other friends, like grandparents' mentality. So that was interesting, and just trying to figure out how to navigate a new world for them, right? Just a place where they didn't have many contacts and everything else. So there's a lot of that informed who I am today, of course. I like I said, I had one older brother. I was an ADHD kid, I think, like most of us. Liked the fun parts of school, didn't love school. Became an entrepreneur out of necessity, like many people. Did everything from selling candy to teaching tennis lessons. I figured if I could get 5 people on the court at one time, 5 kids, and charge them each $5, I could make $25 all at the same time. And then I started several other businesses. Eventually, ended up turning that into I ended up probably the most successful one at the time was a screen printing and embroidery company. I did all the shirts for car dealerships, and then I took that with me to college and did Greek fraternity and sorority T-shirts and stuff. I went to the University of Florida. Finished up at University of Florida 2.5 years. Ended up staying an extra semester to get scholarship money that if I graduated I wouldn't get. Went on
Mhm.
to law school. I worked and had recording studios and my businesses all through law school. And I think I've always been an entrepreneur. I used to say that I was a business guy first and a creative guy second, but I realized that the more accurate explanation of that is I'm a creative guy who had to learn how to do business so I could afford to be creative. And we could
Okay.
talk about that any way you want. But look, I realized from the time I was young, I needed mentors. As many of our friends would say, success leaves clues. Um, when I was 22, I convinced my still business partner, who's 30 years older than me, so this was in 2002, to go into business with me and to mentor me. And we started building an entertainment company and music. I've been a songwriter, musician my whole life. That's what I wanted to do, produce records, and I was managing bands. And he invested with me in that company. We built a company. And he said, "Man, this is the hardest thing I've ever seen, Nick. I've had success in almost everything. This is tough." So he said, "But if you would do the same thing you do for these bands, you're building their brands, building their media, building." We had to do everything from scratch because we were all broke. He
Mhm.
said, "If you did this for entrepreneurs, you could crush it." And so, 15 years later, we've served more than 3,000 entrepreneurs in 63 countries across the globe. And
Wow.
once that started working, I did what any creative person does. I now had some funding to do the creative stuff I wanted to do. So I got back into songwriting, which I still do. Actually, going to Nashville to do some writing tomorrow, write a lot of country and pop. And I got into filmmaking. I never expected to be in filmmaking, documentaries specifically. I now have made more than 60 documentaries, lost a lot of Emmys, won a few too, and I've had a blast in that world. And I think what I've learned the most, just two things I didn't expect. Number one, it's been the most um, the most incredible way to build your network ever. And networking is like it's a term that's really been cheapened, right? Like people like always wanting to get something from somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
But I always show up. I learned, show up and serve first. I mean, our mutual friend Peter Diamandis is an example of that. I met Peter through Joe, like many of us did, and I loved his story and said, "Hey, I'd love to tell your story." And he said, "Thanks a lot, Nick. I appreciate it. Someone else is already doing it." I said, "No problem." And so I just kept asking him about it because I knew most of those people flake out. Eventually, they did. I got to make the documentary. And that was like a seminal moment in my documentary career when people were like, "Oh, this guy's for real." And so, I learned I learned that, always show up and serve first. I mean, that's just rule number one. And rule number two, by serving people well, opportunity abounds. And so, now I spend most of my time, probably 90% of my time, making documentaries. We got 12 projects in production right now.
Wow.
We do everything from, I love biographies and I also love humanitarian stuff. So it's a pretty good mix of that. We could talk about any of that you want. Yeah, just having fun, sharing people's stories, getting to know people better. I love having great conversations with people. I happen to be able to do it, behind the camera, which makes it really fun. And we have something to show for it. And other than that, I've got 3 kids, 2 boys, 17 and 14, and a daughter who's 11, and a wife. I just celebrated my 20th anniversary. And so just life's good, man. I mean, it's stressful. There's no getting around that. But even if they're like, what's stressful to me would not maybe be stressful to someone else. But we all as human beings look for the thing that's causing us the most friction in our life, and we call it stress. And so, so anyway, that's a bit about me. I'll stop there and take a breath.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing all that, Nick. And I just want to publicly say, because I see you post your daughter's dance stuff on occasion, and it is, I mean, she is really gifted, man. She is, I mean, it is.
Thank you.
My daughter is in dance, and I'll tell you, I got to tell you, I met my wife Lisa in '03. She was a single mom for 10 years, raising the 4 older kids. All those kids are out on their own now, married, got kids of their own. I've got 6 grandkids, but I can still remember the first time she informed me that we were going to be going to a dance recital, and this was a first for me, Nick. And her daughter was in dance, and I was like, dance recital. I was not excited about dance recital, but I went to this thing to support my wife, to support her daughter. And I will tell you, Nick, I love going to dance recitals now.
Yep.
And my older daughter, she is still involved in dance. She still teaches dance to this day.
Okay.
My
Cool.
younger daughter, Ellie, who is now 12, has been dancing since she was like 5. And it has been amazing to watch her improve too. And like, yeah, so like when I see your stuff, I can totally relate. That's why I'm always commenting, man, your daughter's amazing.
Oh, thank you, man. Well, look, it's been fun. I mean, obviously something I had only one brother, and neither of us danced. And but it's like for me, it's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, it's funny. Like I've never been to a ballet, but I hear I might like it. But the cool thing about the dance that she's involved in and the competition she does, it's most of it is music I know, which I'm a songwriter. I love music is like my soul, and to see really talented people like add another dimension to music you already like, it's super emotional. I mean,
Totally.
it is fun and rewarding to watch her grow. It'll be interesting to see where it takes her. We have a mentality in my house because I played a lot of tennis growing up and had some designs of trying to go to the Olympics for Barbados and going to college on it. I got some injuries and the normal thing that happens. But I told all my kids, man, anything you do is just for fun. If
Yeah.
God takes it somewhere further than that, great. But like we're not planning how to get a college scholarship on this. We're like
Yeah.
let it be fun.
Yeah.
And so I tell as long as it's fun, we'll keep going. And if it stops being fun, we won't go. But
That's
she
right.
absolutely loves it. So it's really fun to watch her pursue that passion.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, and I'm the same way with my kids. Is let them have fun, man. Let them have fun.
Right.
So okay, so now we've got a little bit of context set, and I'll tell you, you are making such an impact in this world through the work you do, through just helping so many entrepreneurs share their stories with a wide, and not just share their stories, but share their stories in a way that just really connects and engages with people. And so I want to like shift gears a little bit now And I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of everybody listening. So have you ever been introduced to a person that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person? And Nick, I don't know what's going to come up for you in this conversation, but I will say I'm really excited to hear your story, your experience around this, as well as be able to give you the opportunity to honor somebody who's had such a profound impact on your life and on your business.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So, look, I mean, one of my least favorite terms ever is self-made because none of us are self-made, right? We're all a product of our surroundings, and some of that is luck. I mean, I think if we were being very honest about it, as we should be, like you can't will yourself to have better parents than you had.
Nope.
You can't will yourself to have not experienced heartbreak or loss or abuse. If you did, thankfully, I didn't experience any abuse or anything like that. But so I think there's certainly relationships like that have tracked longer. So we'll go a couple places with that. Like number one, I mean, my parents and my brother, look, they've been constants in my life, thankfully, my entire life. And I was always taught, like, one of the coolest things about growing up and being sort of raised in a household that was filled with some scarcity. I think, to be dead honest, what I've learned now, I think part of that was my parents' mindset and them trying to understand a new country and other things that I think it was just difficult for them. But some of it was, definitely there's financial scarcity and other things as well. And I remember being, about 12 or 13, getting into competitive tennis, which is, well, I don't know today, but I can't imagine it's anywhere as expensive as competitive dance, but that's another conversation. But, my parents saying basically, hey, Nick, you can achieve anything you want in life, but we just can't give it to you. So, but we'll support you. And so, like, I had to start figuring out how to make money. And I remember actually, like, very humbly, there's a really great tennis training program that we just couldn't afford to send me to, and thankfully, and I always will use names because I want to thank people. They may never hear it, but this guy named Amre Samakia ran this tennis academy. It was like 2 miles from my house, and he had the number one player in the nation in the men's 16s and the number one player in the men's 18s. And so two of the top juniors literally in the country, 2 miles from my house, and they had a great program. And he basically said, hey man, we'll let you play here for a discounted rate. You're just gonna have to help do some things around here. Okay. And I remember my parents helping me lay irrigation there. I mean, I remember my parents like they came out and they busted their butt to help me to be able to play there. So, and there's like a million examples of that in my life of where, whether sometimes it was resources where I was broke and they helped me do, they gave me their last $50 or whatever it was. And I, made something of it and paid them back. And sometimes it was just, probably more importantly, the mental support of like, hey, it's very much like what I say now, I've got 3 kids and a wife at home who really don't care what I do for my job. Like, like I realized when I saw it, if you remember the reality show, Gene Simmons' Family Jewels, about Gene Simmons of Kiss, when I realized that his kids thought he was a dork, I knew I had no hope, right? But the coolest thing about it is, like, my kids are somewhat intrigued with certain things, depends on what I'm doing, but they just want me to be their dad, right? At the end of the day, they want me to be a good dad and be their dad. And my wife's always like, she'll call me and she's like, where are you again? Like, my friends ask, I know you're coming home tomorrow, but I don't try to keep track of where you are. And so as long as I don't do something to, like, to dishonor my family or my relationships with them, they don't care what I do as long as I'm out doing honest work in the world. Yeah. And so I tell people all the time that, like, I don't have a huge fear of failure because as long as I don't do something wrong to my family, like, they don't care what I do during the day. I walk back into my house, and I guess I'm pointing that way because I bought the house across the street from my house during the pandemic, and this is like my man cave office, podcast studio back there, desk here, music studio. We've got a screening room, a guest suite, a TV studio, and so it's across the street is where my family is. Nice. So I guess I keep pointing over there. And so as long as I don't do something super stupid, if I fail at a business deal or a movie doesn't come out good, like, they don't care anyway. So, like, my floor is just like receiving back love that I give them. And so I think, like, to relate that back to my parents, like, it was always, as long as I didn't do something like really dumb, to go to jail or steal from somebody or whatever, and I made plenty of mistakes in life and they were there to help me through those. Right. I think that's one thing that parents often don't tell their kids two things. Like, we expect you to make mistakes. I've learned that, by the way, doing a lot of work in human trafficking. If parents would just say, hey, we expect you to make some mistakes. Like, I tell my kids now, like, I still make mistakes, like, regularly. Like, I try not to, but I make mistakes. I expect you to make mistakes. But here's the thing. If you hide them from me or try to lie about what they are, you're going to have a lot more issues than if you just come to me and your mom and let us help you try to fix the mistakes. Like, if you come to us honestly, even if there might be a punishment still, but it's gonna be a lot less than if we find out another way. And beyond that, the world will take you to task a lot worse than we will. That's number one. And number two is, I don't think nearly enough parents make it evident to their kids that, hey, we're growing up with you. Like, we're not grown. Like, I had my first son at 25. Like, I'm 42 now. Like, I've been growing up with my children. And I think if I look back at my parents and you look back yours, you realize that is the case. We grew up together, basically. They were a little older, but as we get older, and I'm 42, and I do business with people who are 62, 72, 82, and my parents are in their mid-70s. Like, I do business all the time with people who are, I feel like they're my age and they're 30 years older and we're still learning together. And so I think that's an interesting perspective. So I got to go back and say, like, that was like a very seminal relationship. And I could probably pick some out in each segment of life, but I know we don't have all day. I would say one of the other most important ones was my current business partner. So I met him when I used to attend a youth ministry thing in high school called Young Life, which is all about it's sort of a high school youth ministry that welcomes all people in, and it's a youth ministry, so it teaches you about everyone wanted to go there. Didn't matter what faith you were. It's a Christian organization, but we had Jewish kids. I think we had Muslim kids. Like, everyone wanted to go because they made it so much fun. And then just teach you about, like, hey, here's what we believe. And I grew up Christian anyway, so it was fun. All the hot girls were there, man. We had a blast. And so, but I met at one of they have a club, they call it, like, weekly. And every now and then they have, like, a multiple high schools would come together. And I met my business partner's daughter at one of these events, and then my cousin ended up dating her, and I got to know their family a little bit, and I was like, man, this guy, I was 16 at the time, but this guy, is a lawyer that doesn't practice law, is an entrepreneur, really good guy, and seems to be very successful, and has similar belief system to me. Mm-hmm. I think I like this guy. So I got to know him a little bit in high school, and then I ended up going to college with both of his daughters. And then one of my best friends in college ended up marrying his daughter. And so I went back and said, hey, man, I hadn't seen you in a few years, but here's what I'm working on. I'd love to do some stuff together. And we started up that business, in 2002, that music business. And he's just been a constant sort of Sherpa for me through business and life. And I remember one of the best things he ever told me, which was great. I'd just gotten married. So I got married in 2002. And he said, Nick, you're not going to have a lot of reference for this yet, but it'll help you in both things. He said, I know you want to be my business partner. Because I was like, look, mentor me, teach me, and I'll give you half of everything I make till the day you die. He's like, I don't think you mean that, but let's talk anyway. And he told me a couple years ago, he was like, you did mean that, didn't you? I'm like, yeah, I mean that. And so I said, look, he said, look, Nick, being a business partner is very much like a marriage. He said, and again, you don't have much context for this yet because you just recently married. He goes, but you'll get it. He goes, look, there's going to be, hopefully not, but there's probably going to be days, weeks, maybe even months, and perhaps even years where you feel like you're walking up a mountain. I'm not helping you at all. In fact, I am dead weight, and all I'm doing is holding you back. And he said, as long as you understand there will be an equal amount of time I feel the same way about you, we'll be just fine. I said, okay, got it. It's not always going to be fair on a micro level. You got to go to macro, right? You got to look at, like, the long term. What's it going to look like? So, and man, he just taught me so much about, direct marketing and just how to package things, how to put deals together. And we don't have the same skill sets, but man, we've for years brainstormed for hours a day. Just 10, 15, 20 phone calls, just work. Hey, do you think this work? Do you think this work? He's sort of the guy I would call, especially early on. Like, I'd wake up with this crazy cool idea. And then one time he was like, Nick, I got to, he's like, I love the idea, but look, what else do you have on your plate right now? I'm like, this. He's like, right. He's like, sometimes the best part of an idea is coming up with it. And then we should just leave it. He's like, so I'm just going to leave that there for you. So I've just learned, an invaluable amount. To me, part of what I do when I tell stories in documentaries, like I just did Dickie V's story, the
Yep.
basketball commentator for ESPN. It's on ESPN Plus now, and it's coming to Disney Plus soon. Um, Not announced yet, so let me know before this goes out. But it's coming out soon. We might have to bleep that out. But it's coming there. And then I did Rudy Rudiger's story, the football player who's obviously the guy who's the inspiration for the movie Rudy. And I've done Brian Tracy's story and Jack Canfield's story and Dan Sullivan's story and Joe Polish's story and on and on. And Larry King's life story. And to me, what I love about him, just like my mentor, like you can get a 30-year shortcut from somebody. Like I mean, they lived like. You often, sometimes in interviews, someone will say, oh, yeah, I had a really tough 3-year period in life when I was battling cancer or whatever. And you're like, they just walked over 3 years of hardship in one sentence. Like, people have so much you can learn from them. So I've learned just an extraordinary amount from him. Has been an incredible business partner. And then there's been, of course, through the years of like most people in life, when you find good relationships, they lead to other things. So, I would say for sure, the Joe Polish relationship was very instrumental in leading me to the Peter Diamandis relationship. And the Peter Diamandis relationship was very instrumental in someone like Larry King paying enough attention to me to maybe let me tell his story. And then it led to Rudy, and then Rudy led to Dickie V. And so it's just all, it's synergy, as you know, at in the world of successful people. And good, nice, successful people. It's probably a smaller pool than it should be, but it's a pretty small pool, right? Yeah. And I've just learned so many things from all those people. I could go into depth on each and every one of them. But my business partner now for 20 years has been a very instrumental in my success. And again, I mentioned my parents. I could certainly say the same thing with my wife. I mean, she thought I was gonna be a broke musician when she married me, and she's been there to journey with me the whole way, and it's funny. I'm sure some other entrepreneurs will relate to this. Since we started, when things were not feeling good or not looking good, things weren't going my way, I'd be like, honey, I don't know how this is gonna work out, and I'd bitch and moan about it, whatever, and then it would always work out, right? And my new expression is things always work out because they have to. There's no other thing that can happen. It's what's going to happen is going to happen. But so over the years, it's been increasingly frustrating that I don't get any sympathy from her when things aren't going my way, because she's like, oh, it's just going to work out anyway. And then she'll be like, see? And I'm like, come on, damn it. I just need a little sympathy. Like, feel bad for me. Like, just take it, But it's funny. But she's been super instrumental in just, giving me the confidence to do what I do. Because again, if a business deal doesn't go right, if someone doesn't like my movie, she doesn't care,
Yeah. She's going to love you anyways, just because you are you,
Right.
and same with the kids. They just love us anyways, and there's so much similarity. I mean, my wife knows a little bit about what I do and stuff, but like if I go on a trip she doesn't remember where I'm going or whatever, and my kids, they don't know. They don't have a clue. I mean, they couldn't tell their friends at school what dad does,
Yep.
So yeah.
We went through that. My kids, all three have gone to a Christian school here in near my house. That we go to church there too. And during an assessment for each kid before kindergarten, like they have like an assessment, and one of the things they asked is like, what does your dad do? And so my two boys at first, they're like, I don't know. He travels and stuff. He likes music. And so I thought I was going to get ahead of the situation. And so, but my wife caught wind of it. I told my daughter before she went in, I said, when they ask you what daddy does, just say he cuts deals and makes it rain cash. But my wife shut that one down instantly, but I thought it'd be a great answer.
That's great. That's great. Well, Nick, I really, thank you for taking the time to share. Because, the goal on this podcast, I remember, Tony Grubmeyer, he helped me by recording the intro and outro for this podcast for me. And when we were doing that before the podcast ever launched, he's like, Kevin, get really clear on what your vision is and what you want to see come from this podcast, because the last thing that the world needs is another Me Too business podcast, you know. And so right from the beginning, you know, I was like, you know, I want to give entrepreneurs like you the ability to be able to tell your story and share your story and experience around the most valuable relationships in your life and honor those people. And then for the listeners who are also entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs, I wanted to inspire them to place a more intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful relationships in their life. And you know, because like what you've alluded to here, and what I've known for a long time as well, is as entrepreneurs, relationships are the most valuable asset that we possess. Everything. I'm like, and you kind of shared that. You know, one led to another, to another, to another, and these relationships, you know, and not just in business, but with our family, with our kids, with our friends, you know, they are the most valuable asset we possess as people. And so I want to thank you because you definitely delivered in spades, Nick. And for anybody listening to this, who is just like, man, Kev, I just really like that guy, Nick. I like that guy. I like the way he is and the way he shows up. How can they find out more about what you guys are doing in this world?
I mean, first, thanks for having me on. Thanks for asking the good questions. And, you know, as long as you can spell my name correctly, if you see in the notes, Nick Nanton, you can find me on all socials and nicknanton.com. And otherwise, and reach out if I can be of any help.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Nick, thank you so much again for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on.